Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Angela, and hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining today. I know it's a very busy time of year, and it's kind of various times of day depending where you are in the world. So thanks for making time to come together. So today I'm John Wolton, the Subject Advisor here at Pearson for Geography. I can hopefully answer some of your questions today if you've got any about the adaptations to the exams for international GCSE and also about the contingency plans in case exams are cancelled this summer. So there you can see the contents there. The changes to the international GCSE is what we'll look at first. Then we'll touch on the arrangements for the international A-level. Then we'll look at those contingency arrangements for international, which are different to UK slightly, but importantly. So that's something to look out for when we get to that point, and then look at grading at the end. And obviously I'll talk about some of the support that we've got for each of those as we go through. So you can obviously ask your questions in the chat, as Angela was saying. I have built in some pauses in the presentation to take those questions. So, you know, if I don't answer your question immediately, that's what I'm doing. And hopefully the presentation will answer quite a lot of the questions, but feel free just to chat if you've got any kind of clarifications or if you're not quite sure. So then let's have a look at the summer 2022 arrangements. So just to kick off then, I just wanted to highlight some of the kind of high level information we've got. So there's a summer 22 support page, which gives the latest news on our website. There's a link there, and you'll get this presentation if you haven't got it already after this event. If you don't get it for whatever reason, just drop me an email on teachinggeography@pearson.com and I can send it to you. Very important that you sign up for our general qualifications bulletins, and these are they come through as I think they're called international and general qualifications bulletins these days, and these are high level again, but they have all of the kind of the main updates around the summer 2022 arrangements. We've got some FAQs on the website there, and geography specific guidance on my subject page. It sometimes gets a bit buried for international because we cover all of the UK and international on one subject page. So do double check, do scroll down, make sure that you're getting that information because it is there. One of the things that I know a lot of you will want is a monthly email update from me, which is a sort of single source of information, a single source of truth about everything going on in geography, Edexcel Geography, that you can kind of rely on dropping into your inbox every month. Just to make sure that you, even if nothing's changed, nothing much happened, just to make sure that you're aware that things are as they are, or if there's any updates or news, you've got that in your inbox. So do sign up for those. I know we used to have a lot of people on the list, and I think due to data protection type of things, laws and that sort of thing, people have dropped off, even if they've not wanted to be dropped off. They've kind of been fallen off the end, if you like, due to various systems that we have in to make sure that people aren't receiving things that they don't want. So that's not if that's not desirable, if you're not getting those, do sign up again. There's a form there, sign up for Geography Subject Advisor email updates. If you click on that, just sign up for geography, international geography, and you'll definitely get those when we send out the next one, which will be later this month. Importantly, and this is getting missed, I'm hearing from teachers, is each of the qualification pages has a summer 2022 support section. We call it a tab. That's what it looks like on the navigation, the horizontal navigation there across our website. Each of our qualification pages has that horizontal navigation, and the last one on that list on the right is called Summer 2022, and that's where all the information for Summer 2022 for that particular qualification. So there's a separate one for IGCSE, International GCSE, and one separate one for International A-level. So go to those pages as you normally would do to find out, to get exam papers or download the spec, and click on that tab, and you'll get the information there. There is a link through from that page to the teaching and learning resources page, or the teaching and learning materials page, which has all of the documents, support documents for 2022. So if you go to that page and you think, well, there's not much here, I wanted to find, you know, example papers for, you know, where's the kind of support for around that. If you look on the right hand side, it says access 2022 support, and you click on that and it takes you back to teaching and learning materials and straight to the summer 2022 support materials. Okay, hopefully that's a bit clearer. So then, international GCSE geography. So the change to international GCSE geography include a choice of topics on what an increased choice of topics in what students will be assessed. So that effectively means teachers can teacher-led optionality. So teachers can choose not to deliver a topic because students in the exam won't be assessed. There'll be more choice of topics on their assessed. So they'll just have to do fewer topics in the exam. And we've also removed the fieldwork questions that assess students' own familiar fieldwork experience. So that's about their own investigation on their own fieldwork experience. That might sound familiar because that was what was in plan for 2021, whereas the increased choice of topics on what students will be assessed is new for 2022. At the moment, these changes are obviously for 2022 only. We don't know anything about arrangements for 2023 at this moment. Obviously, direction of travel, you know, is positive in terms of things getting back to normal for 2023, but we obviously do not know what's around the corner at the moment. Optional topics then, to drill down into that mitigation. So this affects paper 2 in the international GCSE geography, and as I say, it includes that additional optionality. And in section A, in a normal year, candidates would answer 2 questions or 2 topics out of 3: economic activity and energy, rural environments and urban environments, and candidates would need to answer 2 out of 3. And because of the recognising the disruption to teaching and learning over the last couple of years, it was felt that this would give some time back to teaching and learning, and this would allow students to make exams less daunting in terms of content revision, and allow a bit of time for catch up for anything that was missed across the rest of the topics. So you don't have to deliver. That means you don't have to deliver 2 out of 3 topics. You can just deliver 1 and students answer that question. If you've already delivered this paper, all 2 topics out of 3, then obviously your students have got a choice of question in the exam. So then this is the detail. As I mentioned there, section A assessment will be either economic activity and energy, or rural environments, or urban environments. The section B fieldwork questions will be on the unfamiliar context only. So it's not going to ask them to assess or evaluate or to explain anything to do with what they may have done in the field. Instead, it will be presenting a scenario, data, resource, and asking students to apply their knowledge and understanding of the inquiry process, which can be taught in the class or preferably in the field if you're able to. That will obviously give them the best experience and the best experience of this to those unfamiliar contexts that they're presented in the exam. Section C then in paper 2 is no change. And it's important to say at this point, in paper 1, there isn't this optionality, okay? We still have the fieldwork changes in section B of paper 1, but there are no changes to paper 1, section A. You will still have to do 2 out of 3 questions in section A. Obviously, there isn't a section C in paper 1. So back to paper 2, we've lost a topic. We're not assessing. We're assessing half the amount of content. So we go from 50 marks in section A down to 25. Section B, we're not assessing familiar fieldwork questions. So we go from 20 marks down to 12 marks. And section C, as I say, no change, so that will remain marked out 35. So the total marks of the paper will now be 72. The exam duration is going to remain the same, 1 hour 45, and that's because we wanted to keep things as familiar as possible in the circumstances. We didn't want time to become, people to have to manage their time differently in the exam or to worry about time. So we've left that the same. Students can obviously, there are regulations, but it is possible to leave an exam hall in a managed way if you've got groups of students that find sitting, if they've completed and they find the time sitting in the exam for that amount of time a poor experience, then you are allowed to manage that securely, departure from the exam hall. But you know, some students will want to use that time to check their answers and things like that. Question types, command words and the mark tariffs for paper 2 will remain the same as they will for paper 1. Okay, have we got any questions yet? I don't think I've seen any in the chat, but do drop them in if you've got any questions about that. Even if we're moving on from that now, if you think of a question later about any of this, do just drop it into the chat. Okay, let's have a look at the fieldwork arrangements then. As I mentioned, students will not have to answer questions relating to their own fieldwork experience, but we do encourage fieldwork if possible. Obviously, it's good for progression. It still needs to be taught anyway because they're going to have to answer questions on each stage, or potentially each stage. Obviously, we don't ask questions on each stage of the inquiry in every exam series. We sample those. So, but they're going to need to have an understanding, knowledge and understanding, and skills about each of the 6 stages of the inquiry process. So that needs to be delivered. And if you can't do that out in the field through first-hand experience, then obviously you can do that in the class through virtual fieldwork. And using like data, secondary data and the like. So I got a couple of questions in, just to confirm for paper 1, how many marks in total, and the timing is staying the same. So paper 1 is, I can't remember what it is at the moment. Is it 6? Does it go down to 62? Is it 70 at the moment? And no, 80 at the moment, and we lose. No, that's not right. Anyway, it's 12 marks fewer than what it is at the moment, 8 marks fewer than what it is at the moment. Yes, I think it's 70 at the moment. It goes down to 62 because we lose 8 marks of familiar field questions only from paper 1, as there's no other reduction in content or assessment in paper 1. And the timing is still staying the same. The timing stays. I think is it 70 minutes or what it is at the moment? I can't remember. I might have a slide on it later. Can't quite remember the sequence of slides, but yeah, so no change to paper 1 other than the loss of those 8 field work marks from section B. Hopefully that answers that question. I'm just going to have a look in the chat and see if you've got anything else. Is there a sample paper available for section B changes? Yes, we've got 2 or 3, I think. I think it's 2, at least 2, section B, and I'll show you. They're on the under that 2022 tab. If you go there, and then on the right hand side there's a button that says access 2022 materials. I think if you click on that, it takes you straight to those samples, those examples. The other way to get there is just to go normally through the International GCSE qualification page, teaching and learning materials, and then you'll see a category, you know, a section called Summer 2022 Support, and it'll be in there. Okay. Yeah, Charlotte's saying you can use them for mocks. Question here, do we know how much notice sentence will be provided about the return of familiar fieldwork questions? For example, yeah, so this is what I was saying at the beginning about we don't know about arrangements for 2023. And I can't see us getting any information in the immediate future, other than we just have to say it's going to be as normal, it's business as usual for 2023. I mean, that's the direction of travel, but we kind of thought it was going to be normal, didn't we, for 2022 at some point. And again, it was probably after Easter in the summer term that we started to get information that we might want to have adaptations and mitigations for 2022. So I would say nothing. We wouldn't know anything this side of Easter sort of time. When I say Easter, I mean sort of March, April, and then I guess after that, getting into the summer term, or the sort of, when I say summer, I mean sort of May, June time, we might have a bit of we might start to get information whether there'll be any mitigations of 2023, and it all depends on the progress or non-progress of the recovery of the pandemic, so, and obviously there's all sorts of political stuff going on as well in the UK and things like that. So we can't say how much notice centres will get, but it's fair to say that they didn't get much notice in 2020, or obviously hardly any. The exams were cancelled. 2021 was less notice. I think we gave, it's sort of in the autumn term, and then 2022 there was more notice. So one assumes on that trajectory that if there are going to be changes made 2023, unless something really significant happens, kind of a short, sharp shock that we obviously don't know about in the future, we would assume that we would get even more time as people than we had for 2022 changes. In the UAE, we need to get students out now with the heat in the summer, sure, and currently they're not allowing trips. It will be tight. Yeah, so I mean, with all of this, you have to remember that we are quite flexible with fieldwork in international GCSE, more so than we are with the UK GCSEs, where you have to sign a form to say the head teacher has to declare that they've been out on fieldwork for 2 days. We don't have that in international GCSE. So, I think we've always said local conditions, local contexts sometimes make fieldwork very difficult. And obviously in a pandemic, that is a pretty good example of disruption to different local contexts, depending where you are. So I wouldn't worry about that. You obviously want to plan to do field work because you want the students to do that field work and have the best experience, have the best opportunity in the exam, have the best opportunities in terms of progression. But don't panic if you're finding it difficult. Just kind of do contact me if you've got concerns and let us know, and we'll take it from there. Okay, let's have a look at this. So yeah, here we go. It's answered the question I struggled to answer about 5 minutes ago. Paper 1, section B, marks have been reduced by 8, the familiar fieldwork marks. So the new paper total is 62, and the examination will still be those 70 minutes, 1 hour and 10 minutes. Again, the rationale is if taking out marks is already changing the exam to some extent, if we then change the timing, it makes it difficult. We know students work through different sections at different pace. We don't want people to have to kind of recalculate timings or try and do things in a different way. So in a way, it takes time out of the equation, hopefully, by having so much time. But as I say, you can manage exit. We appreciate not everyone wants, it's not a good experience for students to have long exams when it's not needed, so you can have managed and secure exits from exam halls. Obviously, that's totally up to you if and how you do that. With paper 2 section B, then again, that's being reduced by 8 marks for the loss of the familiar fieldwork questions. But there's a greater loss of marks on paper 2, obviously, because you've also got the loss of 25 marks for the new optionality in section A. You can obviously see all of this in situ in the example papers. So paper 1 section B, paper 1 and 2 section B are rewritten, as I say, to not include those questions on students' own fieldwork. They'll still have the same choice there of fieldwork questions where they do 1 out of 3. But it'll be out of 12 instead of 20, and that will be both on the paper 1 and the paper 2. And as I say, each question will be set around a context. You can go and have a look at exactly how that will look like in those example questions. But this is important because obviously we wanted to maintain at least one 8-mark question across physical and human. It felt too much to have an 8-marker in both. So we're going to have a structure where one of the papers, the section B questions, will be short answer questions only, in the structure of 1 mark, 2 mark, 2 mark, 1 mark, 1 mark, 2 mark, 3 marks. And then in the other paper, it'll be the 8 mark will be there. So it'll be an intro of short answer questions, 1, 1, and then a 2, followed by the 8. But what you and the students won't know is whether that's going to be in the physical or the human, that structure. Obviously, you'll know after paper 1, but you'll have to go into paper 1 not knowing whether you're going to have an 8-marker or whether it'll all be short answer questions. So you're going to have to prepare them for both, at least for that first paper, and then once you know that, it is slightly narrowed in terms of what you need to prepare for the second paper. As I say, we do have those examples there on the 2022 support section. Now, and that's what the support section looks like. Okay, I'm going to have a quick look at these questions. How many examples of 8 markers are there on the current section currently? How many examples of 8 markers are there on the support section currently? So I think we've got 2. Let's go back, hold on. So there'll be an 8 marker in this paper 2. Sorry, there'll be an 8 marker in structure 1, which is this one. Physical has the 8 marker, and structure 2 is with the human with the 8 marker. So there's 2 8 markers there, and then paper 2 example, a full example with the section B structure 1. So there'll be another 8 marker there. Actually, I'm not sure if that's an 8 marker or short answers only. I need to check. And then there's a paper 2 section B structure 2. So I think it's equal from what I remember when I was doing this a few weeks ago. I think we've got 2 of each. We've got 2 of each. So you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4 8 markers. I think that's right. I'm saying there'll be an 8 marker in paper 1 structure 1, there'll be an 8 marker in paper 2 structure 2, paper 1 structure 2, and there'll be an 8 marker in paper, oh no, there'll only be, yeah, I think that's right. I need to go and have a look. Would it be possible to have more than 2 examples for each, i.e. 2 for physical and 2 for human? So what I'd say on that is we're not planning to produce any more examples, but obviously you can use past papers and any other ones that we've not already adapted, and use the long answer questions there, the ones that are unfamiliar, if there are any that are still unfamiliar 8-mark questions. That's what you're looking for. The other option is to have a look on the UK GCSE and see if there's anything there that would work, because it's the same skill. It's exactly the same principle that we're doing in the UK. Going to look at the rivers and coasts and urban and rural stuff there. If they're the ones that you do, certainly those would be transferable to some extent. Okay, that's everything so far on international GCSE. Now, for the international AS and international A-level, there are no adjustments to examinations, and there's no advanced information. Well, of course, there is already business as usual on paper 4, but there's no additional advanced information on international A-level in the same way that the UK A-level is having advanced information. And that's because there's no adaptations to international A-level, because it's not a linear qualification, so there's multiple opportunities to sit the assessments. So as a whole suite of qualifications, not just geography, the decision was made that there could be potentially other opportunities to sit assessments if there was any disruption, and this would be the fairest and most consistent approach to keep them running as they are. Having said that, although these aren't changes to exams, we recognise that there is an issue with fieldwork, obviously, and it might be difficult to collect primary data for that AS Unit 2. So what we've said is we won't have the fieldwork statement, so similar to IGCSE where we don't have it anyway. There's no requirement to carry out 2 days fieldwork outside the classroom. You can use previous data collected to go through the fieldwork process, or any other data that you might have to prepare students to answer the familiar fieldwork context questions in Section B, Unit 2. And the mark schemes in Section B, Unit 2 are going to give equal credit to those virtual, remotely collected primary data collection, as well as reference to primary data that's collected in previous years, which is essentially secondary data. We realise that, but that's the way that we are accepting it this year. So students don't have to collect data if they cannot. They can use previously collected data or secondary data. Okay. Can't see any other questions coming in, but as I say, you can drop them in any point during the session. Okay, we're now going to look at the contingency arrangements for international. And as I mentioned when we started, there are some key similarities and differences with the UK. This is a summary slide, okay, so I'm going to go unpick this a bit in a moment, but this just gives you the whole piece in a nutshell, if you like. So essentially, we're going to be marking, so this is if exams are cancelled in the unlikely event, and this is done by jurisdiction, so it's not going to be the whole world or a whole area, it's going to be done by jurisdiction. If exams are cancelled, students' grades will be determined using an evidence-based approach, and we would you would set the papers in centre, and then you would send them to us to be marked and graded. And we're marking it, and as we're marking it, that's why we've stipulated, and that's why, so that's different to the UK. In the UK, teachers are doing teacher assessed grades. And because we're marking it, we need to have at least one set of past papers, just to provide that consistency. But it's fine to do those papers over a number of sittings. You don't have to kind of have, like you would in a public examination, you don't have to have stuff. To turn my phone off, it's pinging. You don't have to have them sitting at 3 hours of 3.5 hours of exams, 2.5 hours exams, or whatever it is, all in one go. I say we're marking it, but you can mark it if you want. That's fine. We will still mark it, but if you want to mark it for your own peace of mind and then send it to us, we'll mark it, or you can just send it to us and we'll mark it. Ideally, we'd like you to use a complete set of past papers, but mix them up across a series so it's not predictable. You can also replace questions if you've not taught a particular topic because of the disruption, or you've already used, say, a whole section or a question in class already and done a kind of whole piece on it. Then you might take that out and swap it for one that students haven't done or are less familiar with. And then we will grade it. It's slightly more uncertain at the moment in terms of we're not allowed to discuss how we're going to grade it unless exams are cancelled. And then obviously we'll let you know. There'll be more guidance to follow on how the grading will work. But essentially, it will be examiners will be looking at the quality of the responses in the main, and kind of doing like looking at that in terms of looking at the marks and looking at the quality of the responses. So it'll be quite different from obviously when we have everybody sits exactly the same assessment, and we can kind of set grade boundaries across everyone and do that kind of rank ordering across a whole cohort. It would be done much more on a sort of centre level, individual centre level, like looking at your past profile and things like that. So that's all we can say about the grading. Obviously, with the international A level, that was graded by unit at the moment, isn't it, in normal time? So we would need to have one paper per unit, but you can do more, obviously. You don't have to use padlocked papers. You can use papers that are like the SAMs, for example, specimen papers that have been around for a while. But you're not supposed to kind of use stuff that you've maybe used in class before. So you can just mix it up. So essentially, if you've sat like a whole paper, then students may know what questions are coming up. They may know the format of the questions, or if you've done the whole of the SAMs before, then if you say they might, if you give them paper 1 from the SAMs, then they might think, oh, I know it's going to be paper 2 from the SAMs, so I'm going to just make sure I kind of just prepare for all of those and practice those questions at home. So you might give them paper 1 from the SAMs and then paper 2 from 2019, so that they don't know, they can't predict what's going to come up in the assessment. So that's the key thing, really. We appreciate that you may have used some of this stuff before in various contexts with students, but the key thing is to make the actual assessments as unpredictable as possible, so they can't kind of prepare rote learnt answers before they take the assessment. Okay, I am aware people are putting questions in. I'll probably go through these slides and then look at the questions, because I may answer them over the next few slides. So what conditions should students be assessed under? So the students taking international GCSEs and AS and international AS&A levels, they have to, for this contingency, they should be assessed under exam-like conditions wherever possible. So, for example, Students shouldn't know before the assessment the questions they will answer. Obviously, they may have seen them before, because as I say, they might have seen the SAMs before, but they're not going to know before they sit the assessment that those questions are going to come up. Students have to work independently and not be assisted, as you'd expect, obviously, unless they have a reasonable adjustment applied. Students shouldn't have access to books or revision notes during these assessments, and the assessments should be timed and supervised, but they don't have to be done in like the exam hall under that kind of level of exam conditions. They can be done in the classroom. It's more like a controlled assessment, if any of you are familiar with what goes on in controlled assessments in the UK in the past with BTEC. A centre must, I suppose the other thing to say here is that the centre needs to kind of assess all of its students at the same time on a particular qualification using the same materials. Or if you can't do that because students are off ill, isolating, what have you, you would need to make sure you're using different materials with those students and do it at different times. So essentially, it would be like, it just makes it fairer because the students that have done it at a different time would need to have different materials so that they're not able to know, keep those assessments. It would make those assessments fairer because they'll be less predictable. Maintain some of their kind of consistency across. If you can't do it all at the same time, for a particular qualification, all the students at the same time, then at least the approach for the qualification should be consistent within the centre. So, for example, students must be assessed broadly at the same time. They should be assessed over this broadly the same range of content. So you wouldn't say set, you wouldn't just give the students that missed the assessment paper 1, they'd have to do paper 1 and paper 2 like everyone else. I mean, it's fairly obvious to state that, but just to make it clear. And you'd have to do the same style of assessment as the other group, the main group, if people were doing it at different times, the same style of assessment, but obviously not the same questions. If a centre is assessing private candidate who has not covered the same content as the centre students, that might be an example where you would have to generate an assessment with slightly different questions covering the content that the private candidate has covered. Obviously, if a student joins the centre halfway through the year, they won't have covered the content, so you can only set an assessment for them based on the content that they've studied. Or as I say, if a student's been ill and missed a lot of content, then obviously you would set a different, that would be an exception to this. You would have to set them a different assessment so that it's fair for them. Okay. When should the students be assessed? So one past paper that has not been sat before should be identified. When I say that, that's one full set of past papers. Doesn't have to be that they haven't seen it or they haven't done part of it. It just has to be constructed in a way that it's not predictable. And that would be part of the portfolio submitted. Any other normal assessment points should be used to provide evidence to inform the portfolio if needed. So, for example, you could do, lots of people have done mocks in November or December, lots are doing now, and then lots doing in the first half of the summer term. So you might adopt a different approach to this. So you could do paper 1 now and paper 2 in the summer or in the spring term after Easter. It just depends on how you're delivering the course and things like that. Some centres, obviously for good reason, might adopt a different approach to assessing students, for example, because of the characteristics of the students or the nature of the provision. That's absolutely fine as long as you provide a rationale to us why you're doing something different to what we're sort of laying out here. So there's a lot of flexibility around when you do these. You don't obviously have to do them at the same time. It's obviously paper 1 and paper 2, essentially, in GCSE Geography, or the 4 units for international. How long should you spend assessing? So I think you should aim for the total assessment time of the qualification normally. So, that's 2 papers for the IGCSE and 4 papers for international AS and A level, or across the AS and A level. It's important to try not to over-assess, but to think about opportunities to schedule specific assessment opportunities where that would all come together to give you the same proportion of specification, content, and assessments as normally be covered. Now, I think realistically, what we're saying is you could break it down. You could break it down into topics. So you could do like 6 assessments of 6 topics over sort of 6 months if you wanted. I think most centres will just do papers, full papers, but you don't have to. You can break it down into topics. What content should be assessed? Well, as I said, 1 set of past papers. So, for example, paper 1, paper 2 from IG, or 1 from each unit in the IAL. It hasn't already been sat by learners, should be identified and sat, and that should be part of that portfolio submitted. If you're using papers that they are aware of or they've seen before, as I say, make sure that it's not sequential, so they don't think, okay, this is the 2019 paper, so I know what's coming up in paper 2. You have to give them something unpredictable, give them a paper 2 from either one of the example papers there that we've got, or section out of the example papers, or questions from another paper that it doesn't follow. Students should only be assessed, obviously, as I said, on the content they've been taught. And obviously, it should be a wide range of content similar to what they would expect to be assessed in their normal June 2022 exams had they gone ahead. So it's getting the balance right of making these assessments as useful as possible for students, with the mindset that, well, exams are probably going to go ahead, so we want these mocks to be very much like the exams, vis-a-vis actually, we've got to collect the evidence, and they've not done this, and they've not been taught that, and this student's not done that. Getting the evidence in case you have to submit it for this contingency. So I think most centres will obviously use, full papers and just basically run the mocks. But there is flexibility there, as there's lots of different circumstances across in different centres. So what assessment material should I use? Well, so certainly, as I keep saying, past papers could be used either in full or in part. If required, for example, because all your previous papers have been used. Now, this might be the case with this qualification because it's only been first assessment 2019. You can, as I keep saying, combine different past papers to make them less predictable. For example, paper 1 from June 2019 and paper 2 from November 2021. Or you can combine questions from different past papers in order to generate new assessments, but still in the style of the exams, because you want to make them as useful in case we have exams. If you do want to develop your own assessments, okay, and I say, there might be quite a lot of this with the fieldwork stuff, for example, slotting that in if you've used those already. The questions should be used in a similar style to those found in Pearson's exam papers. So you can use your own assessments, but they have to be similar and they have to be marked in line with our mark schemes. Should I tell my students about this? Should I tell my students about the assessments? Yes. So As of November, when this guidance first was released, you have to tell students before they take each assessment that their performance in it may go towards is part of the evidence used to determine the grade if the exam's cancelled. And you should tell them in sufficiently far in advance that they've got time to revise and prepare, because obviously if exams are cancelled, these are going to be crucial. Students should certainly be told which parts of the content will be covered by the assessment, but they shouldn't be told the questions, obviously, in advance, or they shouldn't be able to predict those questions from any information given to them, okay? This means students should not, for example, be assessed using past papers from, as I keep saying, one particular year spread over the 3 assessment points, as students would be able to predict the questions they would be answering in later assessments. So you can't say, I'm going to set you the 2019 papers over this year, I'm going to do paper 1 now, I'm going to do paper 2 of 2019 in April, because they'll just go and find the questions in the mark schemes for that one. So you've got to keep that under wraps, what you're going to use. Obviously, in exceptional circumstances, it might be necessary for work that was not undertaken in line with this guidance to be used to inform a grade. For example, where a student misses the later assessments because they're ill. So if you've set something like this in quite close to the exams and then they're off, then obviously there have to be a mitigation around that, and we'll give you guidance about what to do if exams are cancelled, but there isn't any necessity to do that, obviously, as we're still planning for exams to go ahead. God, spider, something. Are students required to sit the set of papers in one sitting? Now, I covered this earlier. No, students don't have to sit assessments for longer than the duration of the exams if they've normally been taken place. As I say, teachers are advised to assess students at 3 points during the academic year. Past papers or sections of past papers may be sat individually, as I say. You can break them up across 3 assessments. For example, paper 1 could have already been done in December, paper 2 section A in February, maybe this year, and paper 2 section B and C in April, for example. Do I mark the assessments? So student work may be marked, or it may be unmarked. If it is marked, your annotations should be such that they don't hinder us as examiners from conducting their marking. So I think it just means don't obscure anything. Obviously, we're not going to ask you to Tipp-Ex out your marking before you send it in to us to be marked. So I think just be mindful that someone else is going to be reading this and marking it. Okay, I think comes to the end of the main frequently asked questions. I'm going to have a look in the chat now with great trepidation. Let's have a look. When will we need to decide as a school if exams are cancelled or not? Who decides this, Edexcel or the school? So the jurisdiction, it won't be done at a school level, it'll be done at a sort of government jurisdiction, governance level. So that's not something that would necessarily concern you about making the decision. That would be something that would be, would come to you. And then obviously being aware of this contingency, you'll know then that that's going ahead. It might be quite late in the year, if something happened in May or June, or sorry, April or May, then obviously, you'd want to have this evidence ready to hand. But obviously, that's why we assume exams are going ahead. So we're saying, make sure these assessments are as useful for students doing exams as if they're not doing exams. Can we choose any past paper or any locked ones? Yes, you can use any past paper. We don't. It's best if it's not one that they've sat before. But we understand, obviously, there may be cases where they have sat them. If so, just have to mix up the sections, mix up the exam series, so it's not predictable what's going to come next. Does this apply to any students who may have to isolate over an exam? So this is at the jurisdiction level. So I think with students that isolate, that's a good question. I'm not sure. So you're talking about if exams go ahead and students miss exams because they're ill, I suspect there'll be a separate process to that. It may well draw on some of this evidence that you're gathering now for contingency for sure, but it may be a slightly different process. It's a good question, Fiona. I'll get back to you on that. Just going to note it down. Because in theory, yeah, it would be the same as if a student was ill during the exam. There might be some kind of calculation, but obviously there's this evidence that's being gathered in this way. But whether that is used or not, it's going to be used. I'm not entirely sure. Will there be moderation between jurisdictions as some have suffered more from lockdowns than others? So I think the moderation here is that you are in control of what is assessed. So if you've suffered and you've not been able to deliver significant parts of the course, then you obviously won't have to assess them, because we're saying only assess what students have been taught, and you're confident that they have the knowledge, understanding, and skills to be assessed on. So I think that's how we're moderating. So the evidence that you submit if the exams are cancelled will be reflective of what your students have been able to do, not what they couldn't do because of lockdowns. If we're unable to be in school to complete past papers, can they be done remotely and monitored by the teacher? Yeah, I think so. I mean, so well, actually, I don't know. It's a difficult one because you need to be able to check that they're not using revision notes or textbooks. So if there's a way you can do it securely, then I would say it's possible. But in theory, it would be better to get them in and supervised at a later date and just give them a slightly different arrangement of questions and assessments so that they are not advantaged by knowing from their peers what's in the assessment. That would be my view, although I don't think there's anything in the guidance that says it can't be done at home. It's just that it has to be in those supervised conditions. So there may be a way you can do it through either physical supervision in the home by a staff member, or remote proctoring kind of thing like that. But I think if you need to do that, do get in touch. If you need to do the remote thing, do get in touch and check with us first whether that's what that might look like. And I'll check with colleagues. Are there any other training opportunities for IGCSE and IEL marking coming up? It's a good question. I don't think so. But I understand the need for this, Daniel. So I will ask and I will check whether we can have some marking training in light of this. But do remember, in terms of the contingency, obviously we'll be marking it, so don't worry about that. But obviously, business as usual, mocks and things, you want to do it. There is a mocks marking service as well. But let me ask about the training. So can we use home board papers to look at the fieldwork sections? Can we use homework questions to help create unseen materials for assessments? Well, you wouldn't use homework questions in terms of the fact they would have already done the questions for homework. So, but you can certainly use different materials. I mean, I would sort of strongly recommend to use the exam papers that we produce, because they're going to give you, because we're marking it, we need it to be consistent, across centres what we're marking. But we understand that, teachers, for whatever reason, may need to create their own, and therefore you just have to make them follow our assessments as much as possible. We have, don't we, in international GCSE, we have the regional papers and the other ones. There's 2 sets every year, so there may be an opportunity there in terms of the predictability stuff to be able to go and have a look in those other papers. They're marked with an R. So some regions of the world use the papers marked with an R, and some regions of the world use the papers that are not marked with an R. And they're comparable, but the questions are slightly different. So that's an opportunity there where you can increase the unpredictability by using a paper from the sister paper, if you like, or taking questions from the sister paper. How would it work for Unit 4 IAL? If we provide students with the research ideas, then they would know which paper is going to be used. Yeah, no, there's no way around that. For Unit 4, you will have to make sure that the advanced notice is used in tandem with that. So it's a really good question. You would have to use that as a set, if that makes sense. And there's the same challenge for UK A level, where they're having advanced information as a mitigation this summer. But if that's published on the 7th of February in the UK, and then exams are cancelled subsequently, then obviously the contingency assessments that are used that are set by centres will have to take into account that advanced information. How will students be assessed if they are isolating over an exam? Will they be marked based on one paper, or would we send work for the exam board to mark? So I'm not sure if this is about if they're isolating over one of these contingency assessments or over an actual exam. Again, I think it links to your previous question, so I'm going to copy and paste these, and now into my notebook, and I'll get back to you, Fiona, on that. If exams are cancelled and we are sitting past papers, are we following the traditional structure of the paper or the structure for this year? That's a great question. Yeah, I think definitely the new structure for 2022, because obviously that's what will be sat if exams go ahead, the 2022 structure. So we want to reflect that in the evidence that you're submitting for grades that we may have to give through contingency. Okay, a quick note on grading then. So, as I mentioned before, we won't be giving grading info until we know what is required, until we know it is required, i.e. exams are cancelled. And this is a similar principle in that you don't get grade boundaries before the exams are sat. So, you don't get grading information for a contingency like this, unless it's implemented, it's enacted. But as I mentioned, the examiners are very likely to rely on the quality of responses and do kind of like a mini awarding per centre, rather than kind of set kind of sweeping grade boundaries and things, because obviously everyone's going to be setting slightly different assessments. Everyone's going to be, we're going to have to mark across lots of different papers. It's not one set of papers. But in terms of the overall standard, grade boundaries or marking and grading will reflect a midpoint between the 2021 grading profile and the pre-pandemic grading, so summer 2018 and 2019. So this is a kind of what they call a soft landing or a safety net. So it's more generous than 2018, 2019, but not as generous as 2020. Alongside this, in international GCSE, you've got the adaptations to fieldwork and the extra optionality, which allows the dropping of one topic. And then in 2023, as we talked about earlier, the aim is that we return to everything to be in line with the pre-pandemic standards, and obviously content as well, and assessments to be back to how they were in 2018, 2019. And, you know, we hope that that's the case, but obviously, especially with international, you know, we're talking about different countries and experiencing different epidemics. So obviously things are very much contextual. So it's really important that we stay in touch. So on that note, you can contact me at any point on that email address, teachinggeography@pearson.com. You can tweet me or follow me, or you can send tweets to me directly at Edexcel_Geog. There is a phone line there as well. I mentioned it's important to sign up there to my email updates, which are monthly. That will give you any of the standard kind of updates. But if you've got specific questions, like some of the ones you were asking here that I couldn't answer, do drop me an email to remind me, or if you think of something and you start to panic, because it is quite confusing, all of this planning for something that may not happen, but it has to work for the exams and for the fact that there won't be exams. You're trying to get your head around that is confusing. So don't worry if you feel the need to follow up after this via email to get any other information or clarifications in your head. I'll be more than happy to hear from you. Okay, there's another question. Please, could there be more resources? Yeah, training, knowledge organisers. Yes, so we've had some feedback that the knowledge organisers that we did for GCSE in the UK have gone down a storm, so I've fed that back, that we'd like to have that for IGCSE as well. And the lagging behind thing is acknowledged by me and my superiors and peers, and that we have already put internal structures in place to improve that and to bring international up a lot, bring it, give it the resources and the priorities that we give to the UK, and that's all happened internally in terms of structures. So hopefully going forward we will have you'll have a much more seamless experience in terms of support and the like as the UK gets. Would it be possible to get a mark scheme for examining questions, as there doesn't seem to be one produced? Okay, I'm not sure about that. So, is this an AL? Is this IAL? I'm guessing. I shall follow that up. If I can't get hold of your details, Joanne, and do email me with that question. Okay, thank you. What time is it? It is just gone 1 o'clock. We have got more time. If you've got any more questions, I'll be around for a bit. You can drop them into the chat. Otherwise, it's been real pleasure to connect with you today. It feels like it's been a while since I've certainly had a session like this with the International Centre, so it's really nice. And I'll look forward to putting some more of these in. There are some others actually that have just been scheduled about this. They're not subject specific, they're generic, about the arrangements for 2022, but they're scheduled every month between now and the summer. So as the if and when the situation changes and you're feeling, gosh, what's happening now, you can come to those. You can book onto those on the training from Pearson website. And they'll keep you up to date with anything, if anything changes. But I will try and put on more support sessions like this for international and the UK obviously as well. It would be good to know what time as well is useful, what time of day is helpful, or what time of day to avoid as well, because it's always a challenge to kind of pick a time that works for most people. Would it be possible to send the email update with all the confirmed answers to the questions asked today? That's a good question. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I shall get transcript of this from the hosts, and I'll do that. I shall do that, Sarah. That's a great idea. GCSE, there are examine, analyse questions that is resource-based, section A, paper 1, but we only have C, analysis question and mark scheme. Okay, I'll look into that, Joanne. Thank you. Okay, thank you ever so much, everyone. I think we're sort of drawing to a close. I'm just going to quickly check the Q&A. Are there model answers for 8 and 12 markers for IGCSE? I'm pretty sure we must have those. It's been a while since I've been asked that question. It's been a while since I've been looking at model answers, but I shall go back and have a look. I'm pretty sure we have sample student responses. Certainly, you can look in the examiner reports as well for examiner feedback on those questions. I'm pretty sure we do have some. Okay, I'm going to draw things to a close. Thanks again, everyone, for your time, and good luck with everything. And if you've got any questions or anything, any worries or concerns, drop me an email, and I'll get back to you. And hopefully see you again soon at one of these events.